I did it.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. I like to start on time, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off. I'm thrilled to have you joining us. I know this is a really relevant topic across all industries, and we've been asking, if you're just now joining us, for everyone to share with us the age gap within your organization, and that can be answered via our chat box, or you can answer via the question and answer. But so far this morning, we've had a lot of similarities coming in answer-wise. 17 is the youngest to 74, 16 to 76, 19 to 51, 19 to 75. And so please engage with us throughout. This will help Michelle with her presentation. If this is your first time attending one of our quarterly seminars, I welcome you, and I want to take a moment to introduce our speaker, Michelle McCarter. She's with Blakeman and Associates, and she's a degreed and certified HR professional and has over 25 years of experience. And she specializes in compliance, which I know we all need assistance with, especially when things are changing every single day and it's hard to keep up with. So if you haven't yet, I encourage you to go ahead and mute your computer so it's easy for everyone to hear. And I'm going to hand things over to Michelle. And like I said, throughout, I'm going to be posing questions in our chat box, and I really encourage you to respond, and I'll share those with Michelle throughout the presentation. And then if you do have questions, please feel free to send those via chat, and I'm happy to pose those to Michelle as well. So without further ado, welcome, Michelle. We're thrilled to have you, and we appreciate you taking time out of your day to educate us on this subject.
Sure, I'm happy to be here. Thank you all so much. And it's crazy. Elizabeth and I were talking about it. We've been working together for about 8 years now. So it's always a pleasure. So this is a very rare time, as we talked about before we got started. This is one, these recent years, we actually have 5 different generations in the workplace at one time. And this is very rare. If you think about the different ways that we've all grown up and the things that we've been accustomed to, it changes the way that we think, the technology that we use, the way that we go about everything from our traditional values to how we handle work and everything else. So we're going to break down the different generations. This little graphic here shows a little bit about which generations there are, but it's we're not going to focus too much on the silent generation right now. That for us is the larger. I think we had a few people mention in the older end of the boomer range. So we're just going to focus on Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, and boomers today. Boomers. I don't know if you've heard about this big debate going on, but it's pointing out our diversity. Are you a middle part or a side part, a skinny jean fan, or, there's all kinds of jokes out there. If somebody says something that's very old school, like I went to the library or something, maybe they would say, okay, boomer. So those kind of things, while they're funny, they also can be insulting to some people. So even though we're going to go over each generation here, and we are going to be focusing on some stereotypes, it is best to view people as individuals and not focus so much on the things that separate us, because if we all have to be in the same workforce together and we want everybody to work well and be productive, we need to celebrate what each group brings to the table. So these little graphics here are designed to go over, and although we've got the years here, there is not, this is not like a compliance topic, right? Where there's a standard and it's very specific. There are different things that set each one apart. So the years, according to one source, could be 46 to 64, and according to another source could be a little bit different. So these are, think generally in terms of the years and generally in terms of what drives them and their work style. When we look at these, there are stereotypes like we talked about, but you're going to have some people that were on the cusp of each year. So you've got a lot of overlap. And of course, there are exceptions to every rule. So boomers, that's, you know, people that would work all day. Maybe they didn't have a great work-life balance. If you think of them in terms of employees, they were people that had pensions with a company. Like my dad, he retired with Chevron and has a pension. And a lot of us in the workforce today would be very fortunate to find a company that still has a pension today. So the idea of joining one company and staying forever is not going to be with every generation, but it is something that the boomers have, the baby boomers have been associated with. You know, they tend to be people that work very hard, value hard work. They believe in, you know, getting in there and rolling up your sleeves and paying your dues and earning your promotions and being with one company and being loyal to that company for a long time. So in terms of the stereotypes, it's important to know what they are so that we can be knowledgeable about the subject, but also not, like I said earlier, just focus so much on what separates us. So as I said, hardworking, competitive, they're very good team players, but they can be seen as condescending, especially to the younger generation that's coming in. Now, when you think about their work style and how they believe in paying their dues, you know, if that comes across in the way that they speak to the younger generation, you can see how they might be perceived as condescending, because somebody coming in right out of college or right out of high school or very young may not be perceived by a boomer to have paid their dues and may not know what they're talking about. So that is a potential conflict that could arise. So we want to be aware that this is a concern that could happen. Boomers also have the stereotype that they are less adaptive and less collaborative. So they tend to be very independent workers and thinkers, instead of, even though they can be good team players and good at delegating, maybe their style of accomplishing a task is not a group effort. I don't know if y'all have seen the commercial, cracks me up. It's for, I believe, Progressive Insurance or one of those insurances. And this guy is trying to teach people how to open a PDF, or, you know, somebody's asking a question, are they hashtagging? So that's kind of poking fun at this generation who's less adaptive with technology. So what's important to note here is that they're currently at least a third of our workforce, but in the next couple of years, they're going to be less than about 5%. So when you look at that, that should let you know that your work environment and the style and the values and the work ethic of your, not necessarily work ethic, but work style of your team is going to be changing. So it's important for us to be aware of the different of these differences now and start to plan ahead so that we don't just do the same thing we've always done. We try to get a little more creative about how to address this, because if we just turn our heads to the fact that people might not get along, we're just going to be, you know, having that friction and not the success that we can, because we can build on our differences. So we're going to focus on that today. So as I said, you know, they're starting to leave the workforce. The oldest is going to be 64 back in 2011, and the youngest is going to be 65 in 2034. But this group is staying in the workforce longer than the silent generation or the traditionalists as they're known. But these people, you know, when you think about this generation, we grew up talking on a phone on a wall with a landline. A lot of people don't even know what a landline is these days. We had a cord and there was no privacy. So they value talking and communicating face to face. They're comfortable with that style of communication. The next generation we're going to talk about is known as Generation X. And these are people that kind of are sandwiched in between the boomers and the millennials. So a lot of people are going to fit into this group. It's also about a third of our workforce today. But as you see, that number is going to be declining in the near future. So when you think of this group, you're thinking of they hold a lot of the leadership positions, and although they believe in a little bit more work-life balance compared to the boomers, they're still very driven and very focused on working hard for their employer. They follow the rules, they tend to be independent thinkers, and they like to work independently. They're resourceful, they're very hard workers. And so as you see, they're still kind of close to that boomer. So when you think of the things that shape us, the way that we were raised, were our parents' home, what values did they have in our home, things like that, that shapes how we are and typically how we work. And so this group tends to be innovative, resourceful, and hard workers. But as some of those stereotypes come in, we've got some pluses, right? They're independent, they're management, they're problem solvers. They can be reliable and flexible, and they can bring in revenue, but they can also be less cost effective with the way that they approach problem solving. So again, just this knowledge helps us make better decisions as employers. Now, because the previous generation might have started working earlier, if you think about it, people were baby boomers. That's where they're to get their name from, but they were having babies at a younger age. This group tends to have babies start their family a little bit older because maybe they focused on college first. So they tend to be a little more educated than previous generations. But this group didn't grow up with having a PC or having, access to the internet. If you think about it, this group still had to do things like go to the library for a research project. And they still had to try and figure out the Dewey Decimal System and things like that. If you talk to a millennial about that, they'd probably ask you, what are you even talking about? So keeping that sort of thing in mind helps us understand, the way that we look at problems, the way that we look at opportunities, and the way that we look at, how can we accomplish this workflow process in our workplace. So having a mix of people that are super comfortable with technology and still used to, working hard and finding out the answers or solving problems a different way, when you combine all of those different thought processes, you get a really interesting mix of and a lot of value in creative problem solving, a lot of experiences. So this group didn't grow up with the internet, and they are also expected to stay in the workplace longer. So they're still going to be relevant in the workforce in the next 5+ years. I don't know what happened. Okay, there we go. Oop, too fast. Sorry. All right, so the next generation is Y, commonly known as millennials. And they are generally, growing up in the 80s to the 90s. So if you think about it, we're thinking of things that we had then. So they're roughly about a third of the workforce now, and they're going to continue to grow and be at least a third or more in the upcoming years. So a lot of the jokes that go around, the friction, we have to find a way as employers to combat that and then bring out the value that each group brings to the workforce and try and build on that. So we have to find a way to make the different age groups work together and appreciate what each other brings to the table. So this group, they're competitive, they are flexible, they're enthusiastic, they're very open and civic minded. entrepreneurial. There's, you know, a lot of tech savviness. If you think about this group, you're thinking about, you know, people that have had technology most of their lives. You're also thinking about internet. You know, they grew up having the internet and knowing what that was like, and realizing that that was, you know, access to information was right at their fingertips. So some of the things that can be negative that you want to be sure are not spoken about or accepted in your workplace are that they're lazy, or that they're entitled, or that they're always on their phones. Because if you think about the way that they grew up, you know, and the more formal baby boomers grew up at a time where the workplace was different, you know, maybe the dress was suit and tie, and there were no cell phones, so it was not normal for them to refer to it. But this generation, having a cell phone is normal, and having access to all that information and notifications and constantly checking or messaging and communicating through chats and instant message and texts and phones, those things are different than the communication style in the previous generation. So when you think of that, it's going to mean they might have their phone out at a meeting, and that could frustrate other members of the team. But we need to think about, as the employer, what are we doing to kind of combat those things that could happen? So are we making it known what's acceptable in the workplace? Are we saying, you know, this is a meeting where we're going to unplug and we're not going to be distracted by our phones? Or do we need to rethink in that meeting, is there a benefit of somebody, you know, having their phone and researching what we're talking about in that moment and getting real-time information? So having to look at things differently instead of the way that we've always done it, where maybe our meetings are more formal. Let's look at, is there a benefit to having that accessibility of the information right then and there? Or is it a distraction? So it depends on your workplace, obviously, and what you're trying to accomplish in that meeting. Because it can be seen as disrespectful to, you know, other people, whether it's a boomer or, you know, Gen X. It could be seen as disrespectful for a millennial to be looking at their phone when somebody's talking. So that creates friction. So just being sure that you're making, you're being transparent and you're clarifying what those expectations are on the front end. But if you think about it, it could be something as simple as, you know, they're coming in dressed in a way that's different from what a boomer thinks is appropriate or what your workplace thinks is appropriate. So let's think about those things and talk about them and look at them from a different angle. You know, how important is the dress code, or how important is, you know, calling in when you're sick versus texting? And if we're honest, you know, texting has its place. It's not appropriate for everything, but sometimes it is an effective form of communication, especially if people are going to be checking it more often. So it's more instant, real-time communication. So the next generation that we're going to talk about is Gen Z. Now, this group has never been without a cell phone or a tablet or the internet. Unless they, I don't know, had a project where they had to go to a library, they probably never heard of the Dewey Decimal System or going to the library to research. And that's so old school, because the information has been at their fingertips their entire life. So that's also changed the way that they view things. They view things on a very global level, because if you think about TikTok or you think about Instagram, I mean, it's all these people communicating in real time across the world. So it's connecting us in a way and showing us different lifestyles and different traditions and different values in a way that we've never seen before. So this group, they're a little more pragmatic than millennials. They are very progressive in their thinking. They're very, you know, the individual is made up of not necessarily, their race. They don't think in terms of race necessarily, but the personality, what drives them, what motivates them. They're, as a group, seem to be very creative, but less focused. And if you think about it, when, TikTok is very fast paced, Instagram, not Instagram, I don't use it very often, but Snapchat. So Snapchat is something that is super quick. It's, you try and have that contact, you stay connected, but it's very quick. So they think nothing of having that quick little distraction. So on the negative side, it can be seen as being less focused on what the work at hand is. And right now, they do make up a small percentage of the workforce. Some of the people that contributed to Elizabeth's question earlier have people in the workplace that are 15 and 16. So you're seeing this group, and it's a small percentage right now, but it's a little bit more than 4% right now. This is a little bit dated material, but it will be much larger very soon. And so we have to think about, how does this group think? How are they best managed? How can I reach them? How can I communicate in a way that makes them successful and us successful? So these are all things that we need to know a little bit of, these generalities, so that we can determine the best way to communicate. So knowing all the differences that we just went over, and how we all need to be in the workplace at one time, the fact that we are aware of this, or that we have some knowledge of what the stereotypes are, is not enough. So yes, we need to recognize that we're a mixed workplace right now, and we need to educate our leadership and our managers about the learning styles and the values that each bring to the table. But we need to do more than that. Those are passive things that we're doing. Having knowledge or recognizing it is passive. We need to act to actually bridge that gap. So we need to do things like critical thinking, looking at the things that I just mentioned, like the learning styles, the training, the career growth, the benefits that we offer, the communication styles that are acceptable, the dress code that's acceptable. And we need to ask ourselves some tough questions. Just because we've always done it this way, does that still serve the purpose that we have in our workplace, or the goals that we have? Is this the best approach to get us to where we need to be? So we need to go beyond those details and look at how we can merge the different groups together. So diversity, that's been a huge topic the past couple of years for race relations, mostly in our world today. But, diversity is everything. It's not just the color of our skin or our religion, it's our age and the way that we think and the way that we grew up and our access to technology, as we've been discussing. So not just realizing that we're a diverse group, but embracing that diversity in a way that we try to get the most benefit in the workplace from what each unique group offers. So we need to do things that show our commitment to include each of these groups. So we need to focus on how can we have effective multi-generational communication. So effective communication in the workplace is hard enough without the level of diversity that we're facing today. So we need to look at ways that we can tailor our approach to ensure that we're being understood, to ensure that everybody's voice is being heard, and that everybody's can bring value, the value that they have is being shared and welcome in the workplace. So what we need to really try to understand in our workplace with our leadership is that there's really no one way to recruit, no one way to manage, and no one way to motivate, because we're all individuals, and what motivates me or is a pet peeve for me may be different for somebody else. And that's the challenge of your leaders, to find the best way to get the most out of your team. So diversity, obviously, we've talked about diversity before. It's all of our differences that make us unique, all the things that could entail, whether we were raised in a one parent household or working parent household, or a stay-at-home mom, or the things that we've already talked about with the access to technology at our fingertips versus having to spend hours and hours to find that information. So it's shaped the way that we view the world and the way that we communicate. And those things, there is value in our diversity, because what happens when we had that, polar storm that has kept me out of my office and caused a lot of damage is we had people that had no internet, no power. So what were we doing? We were playing cards. We were doing different things with our family. So, there are going to be times that we're not going to have access to those things. So we need people that are going to have critical thinking and different ways to view problem solving, different angles to look at things, because businesses still had to operate. Certainly COVID has taught us a lot this year, and brainstorming and getting those different views on the table, it broadens our ability to solve problems. It gives us many different angles to look at things. Studies have shown, many studies have been done on the value of diversity in the workplace. 6 times more likely to meet financial goals when you have a more diverse workplace. We have people that are looking for jobs now. When I talk about the diversity in our group, and I talk about people that are looking at companies different, they're looking for diversity in the workplace. So we need to think about how diverse is our workforce, and do we celebrate it? Do we welcome it? Because that's going to impact our ability to recruit more diversity to our team and add to our team. So when we're looking at this group, the 5 different generations, we're looking at the combined value that they bring to the workforce, and we're trying to capitalize on that. We already talked about, the hands-on experience. You've got people that have had 10 jobs, you've got people that have had 2 jobs, you've got people that have, had to deal with a wide variety of different employees. You've got some that have had none. So if you've got a challenge and you've got people that have that wide range of life experience, they know what's worked and what hasn't. One of the things that that being with Blakeman for 10 years has taught me is just the variety and the exposure of the different questions that I've been asked. So had I stayed in my previous job, I wouldn't have had the volume of FMLA or ADA or unemployment or, difficult employee issues that I've had in the 10 years that I've had of all the different client calls and emails that I've gotten. So all those experiences, we learn from each of those, and it makes us more effective in the call that I'm having today because I have that history behind me. So we've got to not discount boomers because they don't know technology, and we don't need to discount Gen Z or millennials or X or Y. They get a little confusing. I guess it's alphabetical, X, Y, Z. So why? Because they have the technology, but not the real world experience, because we're better together. When we combine all of those pieces, we're better together. So also, if you think about marketing, your business, no matter what business is in, there is marketing. So marketing is no longer, just the traditional approach to marketing. It is real life, quick access. So we've started to see ads on TV or YouTube or wherever else. They've had to get creative because now that people are streaming, they can cut through the commercials, or they can fast forward if they DVR them. So, now you're kind of being held hostage on YouTube videos to watch commercials, and companies are having to get more creative about how they look at things. So what we're doing is we're realizing that we have, global access, that we need to look at new trends and see what's hot now. So you've started to see TikTok images make their way to commercials, and you see a wider variety of people than you've seen in the past in the marketing. Well, that marketing for consumer products is the same as your company marketing to recruits, and so that's a trend that we need to be aware of and we need to celebrate in our workplace. So our goal, our challenge is to find a way to harness the best that this wide diverse group has to offer, and then reduce the negatives or mitigate the negatives, that they bring. So as we've said, every voice has value. Every puzzle piece alone is just this little arbitrary piece. But when the pieces fit together in the puzzle, it's a pretty image. It's a picture. It's a complete picture. So the idea is we are more complete when we are together and when we include all members of the team. So your environment should be welcoming. People should feel a sense of belonging. They should be able to contribute regardless of their level of experience in the workplace or their degrees or their certifications, because that takes time. So there might be an idea from a younger person that an older person hasn't thought of. So bringing everybody to the table and allowing everybody to contribute, and then respecting their ideas. We may not agree with them. We may not put all of them into action, but the broader scope that we have to look at our decision making, the broader range of ideas that we have, the better off. And we need to show appreciation for that. So I'm a basketball fan. We do a lot of basketball in my house. So I like to use a basketball analogy. My son is 15 and he's 6'3" right now. So we're all about basketball. So we think about in terms of basketball team. If you think about how good it felt to when he made the high school team, or how good it felt to be drafted. I mean, we've got people being drafted at such a young age. I don't know if there's any Luka Doncic fans in the group today, or of course you can't talk about basketball without talking about LeBron, but these are people that, they made the team, they got drafted. So that's equivalent to being hired. And so you've made the team, you feel good making the team. But what if you were always sitting on the bench? That doesn't feel very good. You don't have that same sense of pride and accomplishment. You don't feel very motivated to stay at that team. That might be a reason people switch teams, because they don't feel like they're being utilized enough. So in the workplace, that might be the reason people look for other jobs. They are going out to find a place where they are valued, because they're not feeling appreciated or valued here, because we're not making them part of the team. They're hired, but we're really not letting them get involved in our organization or making it better, or some of the tough things we come about. So when you include your team, you're increasing that loyalty to you, and the challenge that you have is whatever your workplace is, whether it's making widgets, whether it's, marketing and sales, whether it's, getting the trucks out. The more involved they are, the more ownership and the more they care about doing what they can for your team, for your company. So basically, we're talking about the bulk of people. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, and there are always going to be people that are going to be difficult. And the challenge in hiring and management is weeding out the people that are never going to be a good member of your team. So we're talking about, in general, the people that want to do a good job and want to be of value to your company. So if you think about how much better you feel when you play, think about how much better you are as a team. No matter how great a player LeBron is, without AD, without Anthony Davis, who's been hurt part of the season, he's not as successful. They've had some losses, and we've seen what the lack of that partnership or that team that they they create, the way that they work well together, we've seen how that has played out. So we need to be aware of that and translate it into the workplace. So each employer needs to challenge themselves. And this is where your HR department should be involved in the leadership and communicating with the owners and, looking at the future, because these are things that are on our mindset as HR people. And if we overlook this, we're really, if you go back and you look at the numbers of the diversity in the workforce, we can't just ignore this issue. So we need to think about it and plan ahead. So one of the big ways that we need to work together is to embrace effective communication across our generations. And that goes for any diversity, so across race and religion and everything. So when it's right, communication increases the understanding between the parties. It improves our relationships. When I feel heard and you get me, I tend to communicate with you better. I give you the benefit of the doubt if you do something that is frustrating me. I overlook something and I work harder because I feel comfortable with you, because I know you value me and I value you. So that sort of teamwork is going to build that trust. And a challenge in so much of the workplace today is that there is not trust between management and the employees. And when there's a lack of transparency and a lack of trust, there's a lack of engagement. And so, as I mentioned, our goal is trying to create that engagement and keep it going. So there are a lot of barriers to this effective communication and involving everybody the way that we need to in the workplace. We're going to go over these today. Bias, we're going to talk about that, including unconscious. There's also, judging and criticisms. When I talked about earlier, dress codes, there have been the young generations that I know. My son went for an interview in shorts and flip-flops, and I was appalled. I said, you have to dress for the job that you want. And that might be an older generation's way to think about it, but it might be something that you really need to think about in your organization. If you have a standard of dressing, does it fit what's needed in the workplace? Could it be relaxed a little bit? Is it fair to judge somebody's ability to do the job based on how they showed up or dressed? Well, if they're a salesperson, then I would say yes. Or if they're a professional person that has to have that role, then I would say yes. But you have to keep in mind that the younger generation might value their individuality and the comfortable clothes, and they may not believe that they they have the ability to express themselves through their style. And that if you're going to be so stiff as an employer that you're going to not hire them because of how they're dressed, then they don't want to work there. And that's relevant to today's employers, because you are going to be recruiting the younger generation, and you have to recruit them and hopefully get them to stay. So retention is another thing that we've got to look at in the workplace. When we look at the barriers, we need to think of them in terms of, the cost that it takes to recruit and hire somebody and train somebody, and then they turn around and leave. So these barriers are things that are real factors that we need to consider that are going to improve not just the quality of work while somebody is there, but the longevity and the value that they bring to your organization longer term. So we're going to break these down. So what's a bias? A bias is when we have an assumption or a belief or a prejudice about a group of people. So a bias can be conscious. We can know that we do it, or it can be unconscious. So it's not, it is not something that we can necessarily help when it's an unconscious bias. But just because we have a thought pop into our head about, in this example, another generation, if we think, oh, they're always on their phone, they're disrespecting me, or we think they are so distracted, they're not getting anything done. These are thoughts that are fine to go in our head, and they are a bias. But if we act based on that thought, if we speak that thought, then it's going to have a negative impact in our workplace. And these are things that we need to be aware of. So we need to capture that thought and look internally and determine, have I been biased against a certain quality that somebody has? A bias is not illegal in itself. And it's human nature, because we gravitate towards what's comfortable. Our minds work quickly and they automatically sort what we think into categories of familiar and unfamiliar. And we're more comfortable with things that are familiar. So biases can come from that. So we need to make it a habit of challenging ourselves to capture that thought before we say it, and question, is it a bias? Am I giving this person a fair shake? Am I giving their idea a fair shake? We don't have to immediately understand it, but we want to include them, because there's benefits that we've talked about for including them. So we want to allow them to share. And if we criticize immediately, or we discount immediately, we're not getting the true value of what they can bring to the table. So they're just riding that bench. So judging, we talked about this a little bit on the previous slide, but it's when we're criticizing, name calling, we're making assumptions, and especially when we're doing it out loud and in an obvious way. So we really don't have to be best friends with the people that we work with. We don't have to hang out outside of work, but we do need to interact in a way that is professional and respectful and follows company policies, and in a way that reduces the strife and the discontent in the tense nature in the workplace. So realizing that we might have judging critical thoughts is important in how we can embrace inclusion and how we can have effective communication with our diversity. So gossip can just completely tear down an organization, and it's prevalent. I mean, you look on social media, nobody can make a comment without 5 people bashing them. So this extends to the workplace, because this is the environment we're in. So taken to the extreme, it can be bullying and harassing, and it can violate company policy. But even just casual conversation where we, talk down about another person affects our ability to work together. It breaks teams apart. It causes poor morale. It's disruptive in the workplace. So as a manager, as a supervisor, you need to not just be the example of what you want your workplace to be, but hold others accountable to the behavior that's acceptable in your workplace. So as I said, it could be something that is actually breaking the law when it gets to the level of harassing or hostile work environment. So even though it's something that we should care about because it breaks apart our teams and makes us less effective as a group, as a company that has different departments that have to work together, it also could be against the law and cause financial impact, negative impact to your business. So one of the biggest challenges in effective communication is that we really don't listen to understand the other person's point. We don't listen to, and I say this collectively, we're all guilty of it to some degree. So we need to be aware of that and capture that and challenge ourselves to be better. because we don't really, as a whole, always listen to understand and give somebody's idea or thought or position a fair chance. Most of the time we listen to either show that we have something in common or reply, whether it's to the negative or to the positive, whether it's to reply to commiserate and to show empathy, or whether it's a reply to the negative. We're still listening for our opportunity to speak instead of actively hearing what they're saying. So one of the other barriers that we have to effective communication is when we are just focused on our response. We're while somebody's talking, we're sitting here thinking about what we're going to say next. So when we're doing that, we're not really hearing and giving what they have to say a fair shake. We also can be doing something called rebuttal brain, which is how what they're saying is not going to work. So immediately going through all the ways what somebody has won't work. We're not giving them and their ideas a fair shake. And when we constantly shut the other person off by either responding, whether we're interrupting them or whether we wait for an opening in the conversation, when we're just moving on to the next thing, or we say, no, that won't work, we've tried that before, or, you know, we've got this, think of restaurants where they had to look at, you know, car-side delivery this past year, and they had to problem solve the best way to do that. Or if they didn't have a cart online, what did they have to do to get ready? And so listening to people, problem solve that idea. If you shut down everything somebody says, then you're going to shut me down, and I'm no longer going to contribute to the extent that I did before. I'm no longer going to care, and I'm no longer going to feel like a valued member of the team. I'm going to start looking for a job. So a lot of the younger generation, remember, they're not used to staying somewhere and being loyal for 20 and 30 years at a job. They are looking for the experience and the growth and the quick return, and then they're moving on. So we need to capitalize on the short time that they're there, do things to improve our retention at the same time, and be able to show growth and value so that they continue to be able to improve our workplace. So we need to listen to understand. We don't need to interrupt. We can ask questions when they're finished talking because we want to show that we listened and we want to clarify what we heard them say. So doing that is a way that we can shut down rebuttal brain and shut down response prep. But it's something that we've got to be focused on. It's something that we have to care about. It's something that we have to be disciplined about. So unprofessional communication, this is an obvious barrier. So if you're talking and you're using a tone of voice that, how dare you do that? That is going to shut down communication. If I'm rolling my eyes when you're talking to me, I am letting you know that I don't appreciate what you have to say. Now, I know y'all all know these things, but it's something that you need to bring up because these sorts of things shut down the effectiveness of our communication. And now more than ever, we are a diverse work group, not just of gender and race and religion, but of age. This is the most diverse time in our history. So we have got to check ourselves. We have got to have self-awareness of how we are coming across to others. We have got to realize that we all have room for improvement, and that making eye contact is important. And maybe using jargon in our industry or slang or profanity is going to impede the ability for us to communicate effectively with each other. If, like my kids used something the other day and they said, okay, boomer. And that was the first time I had heard it. I mean, it's a couple months ago, I've known about it for a while, but I didn't know, they had to explain it to me. So I didn't understand what the comment they were making because they used what's relevant in their world and their age group right now. So we have to think about that. If you're talking to a computer person and they're talking about bandwidth, do you know what they mean? If you're talking to somebody outside of your group, do they know what you mean? So in order to have effective communication, we want to make our point. We want to be understood. If we're using words choices that aren't understood across all generations, that's a way that's going to impede that successful communication. So being unprofessional, disrespectful in our language and approach, that's never appropriate. Being humiliating and intimidating to make a point, also not appropriate. Not trying to connect or to understand your team should not be acceptable in your workplace, because this is something that is going to have a ripple effect on both your, the engagement of your culture, the comfortableness in the office, which the younger group is looking for comfortable workplaces. They're looking for flexibility and comfort and acceptable acceptance, and that they're valued, that what they have to say is appreciated. So we need to realize that we need to go back to the golden rule, that we need to be positive and respectful in our communications. So one way that we need to do this is, as an employer, to onboard and orient and emulate and hold accountable the things that are going to deter our ability to communicate and work effectively together. Another thing is that's a barrier is sometimes we make it our job to solve somebody else's problem, and we give unsolicited or unwanted advice. Why this is problematic in the conversation of the variety of generations that we have today is because we have people that have grown up where the woman stayed home, and we have people that have grown up in a one-parent household where the mom always worked. So your views, depending upon how you grew up, right or wrong, they're your views and you're entitled to them. Well, that may come out in something we say to somebody else, and it's not our place, and it can impede our ability to work well together. So there was an actual lawsuit where an older member of the team worked with a younger member of the team that was a working mother, and kept giving articles and magazines or sharing things unsolicited about the detriment of the children for a working mother, because that he thought he was helping. He thought he was being helpful to this person, but this person felt judged and criticized and uncomfortable with this person and even harassed. And it doesn't really matter what somebody's intent is. When you offer unsolicited advice that's based on your personal values and things that you feel are important, you have to realize the impact that that could have on the other person. This person ended up filing a hostile work environment complaint. So the company that now had to deal with making the widgets and getting them delivered and customer service and sales being down and COVID now had to take a break from all of those many things that keep them busy to answering an EEOC complaint and possibly facing a lawsuit that is another cost to their business. So these things are important for us to be aware of. So just realize some people like to talk things out. Plenty of people call our office just to talk out a situation, and I listen to them, and then they ask me, what do you think about this? Am I forgetting something? What haven't I thought of? And that's how they're helping to make their decision. So I'm not giving them necessarily advice, because that's not what they're asking me for. So we have to realize that sometimes it's the process that we go through to get to the answer. So one of the big things that we want to take away from this training is that approaching things in the same way is not going to work anymore. I don't know how many of y'all know what Blockbuster is, but Blockbuster was a video store where you would go and rent videotapes and DVDs. And they did not evolve. They did not change. They did not adapt to the changes in their environment, and they are no longer here. If you would have asked somebody back then that went to Blockbuster every Friday and Saturday night, would Blockbuster not be here 10 years from now? They would say no, because we didn't pay attention to what was happening around us, and we didn't think about how it impacted our workplace, and we didn't think about the changes that we needed to make. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, the retirement employees, not all, again, we're making broad generalizations here, but not everybody is looking at coming to a company and staying for a long period of time. The company has to offer something to the employee for them to want to stay. So whether it's a variety of benefits, whether it is the flexibility, whether it is being included in the workplace and feeling that there are growth opportunities within your organization. These are things that we need to look at. How do we offer? Do we offer choices with benefits? Do we offer a career growth ladder? Are we so busy managing the tactical day-to-day workload that we're not thinking about how starting in this position gives somebody a unique experience to then be successful in this position, in this position? Are we working on training people and communicating with them that even though I hired you here, I really love what you did here and I can see you growing here? When we do that, people feel like they have more of a future with your company. We need to look at the way that we provide feedback as managers. What we're seeing in the younger generation is people want regular feedback. They don't want an annual review. They want recognition for a job well done in that moment. They want feedback of what they did right or wrong, as long as it's delivered in a constructive manner. They want it in that moment, either so that they can change or so that they feel motivated and engaged to tackle the next project to the best of their ability. So we need to review our raise, compensation packages, employee evaluations, management training. Do we train our managers how to communicate and how to motivate our staff? Or do we just promote the best driver to be the driver manager and then expect that same skill set to be all they need in their new job and they'll be successful? I see that happening all the time, where we promote people out of their ability and we don't give them the training that they need to be successful in their new position. So we've got to ask ourselves these hard questions, and we've got to review our work environment in a way that we try to better the group as a whole and better the company as a whole. People are looking for work that has a purpose. The Tom's Shoes Company, and can't remember, I think it's Bombas Socks. So I've purchased from them just because they donate a pair of socks or a pair of shoes for every one purchased. And I think that's brilliant. But this is the, you know, environment that we're in now. People want to work. They want their work to have a purpose. Excuse me. They realize the global awareness. They realize that different people have different challenges and they want to help, or they want to feel like they have made something better. So we need to capitalize on that. We need to look for ways to mix the teams. If we have everybody in management that's a boomer, for example, and everybody that's entry level is a millennial or younger, then we are not mixing and improving our communication. We're not mixing and getting a more diverse way of thinking. We're not including the younger group. So even though I may have, you know, millennials here and boomers here, maybe there's reverse mentoring that can be done. Maybe there is teams that we can mix up for a project or an inventory day or a fun bonding activity like Top Golf or a volunteering activity where we go help a charity as a team. Studies have shown that the more time we spend with each other, especially when it's a positive, centered around a positive activity, the more comfortable we are with each other. So that extends to the workplace. It extends to being comfortable sharing our ideas, sharing negative feedback, sharing positive feedback, sharing suggestions that we have. These are things that we need to kind of put on our to-do list. We need to look at our workplace flexibility. We need to look at, you know, as the younger generation comes in, they're looking for more workplace flexibility. What we've seen with COVID is that we can work from home. So there are more people wanting that these days. There are more people seeing the value in that. There are a lot of organizations that are resistant to that because it's different from what they've done in the past. Well, different doesn't always mean worse. Different might mean better. Maybe there's something that we need to look at. It's not going to work in every job and it's not going to work in every company. But unless we consider things, we are not going to be a relevant employer. And when you're looking at a workforce that is used to changing jobs every so often and where they prioritize workplace flexibility and contribution and acceptance, and that's going to be the bulk of your workforce in the coming years, we have got to look at things differently. So whether it means Fridays off or every other Friday off or one day a week off, that may be unheard of for some organizations. Maybe it's come in later, leave earlier. Maybe it's you know, more PTO. Some companies are even looking at unlimited PTO. Don't want to scare y'all, but that's out there. We've got to look in a real way at these things, whether it makes us comfortable or not. We've also got to look at our workflow processes. You know, do we do the same thing the same way for the last 5 or 10 years? If we do that, are we missing a benefit that technology may offer? Are we missing how we can streamline processes and save money? If we're so used to printing everything and scanning it, I mean, could we go to something, a document that's just coming straight through email and being saved to the server? Think of all the time that saved. So we have to think about these things because the younger generation is more comfortable with technology and they're going to look at a very manual, heavy paper process as not being a very progressive company. And that's going to affect the way that they view your company. And they may feel like they don't belong there. And again, we're talking about the expense of hiring and training and onboarding, that we need that person to stay for a while so that we get some of that money recouped and the benefit of that add to our workforce. So we need to realize that we need to adapt. We all have frustration. Oh, yes.
Really quick, I have a question that came in that's relevant to what you just spoke on. So an organization is struggling with boomers accepting the shift towards working remotely. They're seeing it's becoming increasingly important, like you mentioned, for workplace flexibility and working from home. How can this organization have these hard conversations with their boomers regarding this? The boomers feel as though individuals that work from home aren't as productive.
So that is such a relevant question. I've heard so many complaints over the COVID year exactly like this. So I think it just starts with conversations. So tell me why you have a problem with it. Tell me, tell me what your concern is. Let's brainstorm. Let's get a couple people in here and let's brainstorm ways that we can solve that problem. So one of the things that I've heard is that we're worried that they're not sitting at their computer from 8 to 5. So this is one of those hard questions we need to ask ourselves. Does the job need to be sitting at your computer from 8 to 5? Or do I have projects and deadlines? Do I need to step back and let go of the micromanaging a bit to say, you know, what do I expect this person to accomplish? Do I expect this person to accomplish and respond to every email within 24 hours? Do I expect them to grow sales? Do I expect them to be at Zoom meetings and produce results? Then why? Ask yourself those hard questions. It's going to be uncomfortable. Why do they need to do that from 8 to 5 in front of their computer? We need to look at ways to hold them accountable to reaching their goals in a way that's different from what we've done in the past. So it may mean that we need to recognize that, you know, I might take a break and start a load of laundry, but I'm not going to shut off my computer at 5 if I took a break to do that because I didn't get my job done. So not everybody is going to do that, and not everybody is going to believe their employees are going to do that. But we've got to look at the way that we manage and change what we manage to, you know, because people can be disengaged in front of their computer from 8 to 5. They could be surfing the web from 8 to 5. They could be not productive from 8 to 5, but they're physically there. So it may not be they're really adding the value to your organization that you need them to add. It could be that they're more productive at home because they're able to reach the goals. So we need to look at what do we want out of the job. And again, not every job is going to be able to work from home, or maybe it's a hybrid situation where there are some days you can work from home and other days that you have to be in the office, or some days, you know, you work half day in, half day out, whatever it is. But looking at some of these things in a different way, in a creative way. We have the technology, we have the ability to, you know, plug into our servers remotely. We have the ability to be available 24/7. I mean, when you think about the global economy, we're already dealing with different time zones. So depending upon the job you're doing, 8 to 5 may no longer be relevant, even though it's what your company is comfortable doing. It may not be the best approach. So you have to have those hard conversations where we say, let's talk about what's making you uncomfortable. Let's talk about ways that we can solve it. Let's talk about what do we really need to see from this position. And then let's openly communicate, because we want that transparency. We want to say, your job is to accomplish this, this, and this. I need you to give me an update every day where you are towards your goal, because I don't want to be surprised at the end of the month that you're not there. And it's going to ease my uncomfortableness by you giving me that feedback. And that's what I need. I'm uncomfortable with this. You're uncomfortable giving me daily feedback. Somewhere we need to meet in the middle and see how we can solve the problem that's most beneficial to the company. Not just doing it the same way because we've always done it that way. So I hope that that helped. But are there any other questions or any interactive things you wanted to discuss?
Not at the moment, but keep those questions coming while we have Michelle here. We all can learn from one another. Yes,
please, because y'all get the notes of this, so you can see what's on the slides and you can refer to it later. But just in general, we all need to do our part to make the work environment what we want. Nobody, regardless of your age, wants to go in a workplace that's tense. You can feel the tense, unhappy workplace when you walk in. We all have pet peeves, but we need to ask ourselves, am I willing to die on a hill for this frustration? Is it a real problem that impacts my bottom line and impacts operations and impacts customer service? Then yes, then we do need to address it, but we need to address it in a way that is respectful and effective so that we're being heard. And if we want to be heard by other people, then we need to hear them out. And whether you're a boomer or a millennial, or whether you're the CEO or the manager, you have value and you have value. Everybody has that value. And if we don't start listening to each other and trying to find a way to meet in the middle, we're going to have that tense, disengaged, unhappy workplace that is not going to be successful. It's going to have constant turnover. It's going to be spending way more money than they have to out the door on recruiting and onboarding and training. And we're never going to get to that next level of performance. So we need to tell people what we expect, and then we need to hold them accountable. But it may be different expectations and different accountability than we've had in the past. We don't need to always agree, but we do need to have a basic premise that we are going to at least be kind to each other. So we need to be intentional towards our diversity and our making people feel included. So we need to bring people into the conversation. If we're in a group meeting and somebody is not talking, or somebody is on their phone, or they're not engaged, let's ask them a question. Let's ask for their feedback. Let's be sure that we're aware of the things that are going to impede our ability to listen effectively, and let's shut those down before they become a problem. So when we look at how we want to turn off rebuttal brain, we're going to look at ways that we can show interest by our questions. So if somebody offers an example of something, instead of us doing that barrier that we talked about earlier, where we're thinking about what we're going to say or why that won't work. We tried that 5 years ago and it won't work. So instead of us thinking that, we need to reprogram our brain to say, well, how could your idea work? Give me an example of what you're thinking. And then ask the group, is there a way that we could test the idea first before we say no? Maybe it won't work. Here's a question that I asked, but I don't think on time we have the time to go through it. But basically, being inclusive in the workplace doesn't mean you have to agree on everything. And it doesn't mean that you have to keep your opinions to yourself. You can disagree, but we just need to actively listen, make sure that we're disagreeing about what they actually meant, and then give other ideas a chance. They may not work, but they might be something that leads us to a better solution later. It might just be something that gets the conversation going. When you're sitting down trying to solve a problem and you have one person that has a thought, it spawns another thought in somebody else. And before you know it, it's a wonderful thing to see this brainstorming in action, because before you know it, this person added to your idea and thought of it a different way, and this person added something else. And before you know it, the group of people that are energized and motivated and just light up at the ability to solve a problem and work together, that is priceless. So it gets you to a place, it gets you to a solution you may not have had before. But we need to be willing to spend a little bit of time and a little bit of effort focusing on the value of that activity. So if we look at, you can be meeting to death, don't get me wrong, but if we don't value when we have a real issue that we're trying to get to the bottom of, like the working at home and the impact it's having to the workplace, maybe let's get together in a group. And our challenge for that meeting is to look at ways we can solve this problem on both sides. If we don't get to that point where we're getting that free flowing thought and bouncing off of each other and building on each other and brainstorming, we're not as effective. We're not as, and there's value that comes from that, whether we solve the problem that day or not. I feel like you've heard me. I feel more comfortable with you now. I'm going to maybe look at you in a different way. So the training that we're doing today is something that you should go back and talk to your team about. If you have boomers that are looking at that Gen Z and the flip-flops and are disgusted, then we need to talk about that. We need to talk about that frustration and talk about what really makes sense in the workplace. So the values vary. There are some that everybody has in common. We all need compensation that makes us happy and productive. We want incentives that stock and gift cards and benefits like tuition and student debt assistance. These are newer benefits that people are looking for. So one of the things companies can do is if they have a pool of money that each person can choose maybe what benefits suit them the best. Maybe it's not something we can do right now because the economy is hitting us hard, but maybe it's something that we look at when things start to pick back up. But maybe we ask our workforce what, we do a survey, maybe anonymous, because we might get more participation that way. What benefits do you really appreciate? And then leadership takes that. Looking at streamlining daycare, things like that, work-life balance. What we're seeing more with the younger generations is a work-life balance. That is what people are looking for. They're looking for, they don't want to spend their whole life working. They want vacations, they want experiences, they want things that are going to enrich their life. They want variety. So we need to look at ways that we can create that, because our boomers are on their way out of the workforce. We're going to be shortly a group that has a much younger workforce that values different things. So now is the time for us to look at what we can do different and what we can change it up. So recruiting, we've touched on this a little bit on the slides, but millennials and younger, the numbers are only going to go up for the younger generation. 6 out of every 10 are always looking for a new job. So if I'm happy and engaged and feel valued and compensated fairly where I am, I'm less likely to look for another job. So we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of our digital presence. We have to be aware of how we use technology and if we use it in a way that's attractive to new recruits. We have to look at things like online reviews. In the younger age groups, you're looking at people that are reading Glassdoor and other reviews. They're looking at your company Facebook page. They're reading Google reviews. They believe that those independent reviews are valuable, and they are seeing those as being something that they put a lot of stock in. So they're going to make an impression about your company based on some of these reviews. So we need to think about that. We need to think a little bit about flexible hours and how we look at that. We need to, like I said, just think of things differently. So managing and motivating, we've touched about this throughout the presentation, but to be a little more specific, you've got to just focus on communicating differently. And if there is a way that maybe you're very heavy on printed materials and some people learn better in printing, that we recognize that she learns best by taking notes and having a paper in front of her, and he learns best by having access on his phone to the server. You have to decide in practical ways, is that safe and secure for my environment and my material? Is that something that I want? Do I lose control over trademarked material? Or does it make sense to meet in the middle with how people learn? We can't necessarily train people all the same way, because if you think about the variety that we have out there, the different ways that we've learned through the years and the different access to information, you can see that of course we're going to have a broader and variety in the style and way that we learn. So we need to think about that. The younger generation wants to be told what their purpose is, not necessarily you do step 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes is it important that they do 1, 2, and 3, or can they accomplish that task maybe in a better way that they're more comfortable with, that they understand the why? We need to look at some of our policies like dress code, cell phone usage, email etiquette, and we need to clarify what our expectations are. We need to decide what we can do and then communicate. Now we need to hold people accountable because you can't forget the style may not be appropriate in the workplace. So what I mean by that is the younger generations, a lot of them tend to look at social media and catch up at night. They are on their phones, they read their emails. They might answer emails at all hours of the night. So you need to ask yourself, is my focus of my company something where it's inappropriate to answer outside of normal business hours? If so, then you communicate the reason why that's not acceptable. Is the person an hourly person or non-exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act? Because you have to think about the employment laws. The employment laws extend based on the work that they do, whether they are physically in the office or not. So if somebody's working remotely and they check that email at 10 o'clock at night and respond, that is considered work. So you have to ask yourself, are they an exempt person or do I need to track that time? If they're getting unauthorized overtime, did that violate a policy? Do I need to communicate that to them? Those are things that are going to be important. So you need to explain that it's unacceptable for you to check your email and respond at 10 o'clock at night because that's work and you're paid by the hour and that's not appropriate. So you just explain the reason why. But if they're a salaried person and it doesn't matter, think of that generation as one that values quick response time. They're used to chat and instant messaging. They want it's ingrained in them to respond to an email immediately. It's ingrained in them to give that feedback prompt. That's what they give. That's also what they want. So you may need to talk to the boomer that thinks it's okay to only answer emails from 8 to 5 and have some of those conversations. If you have a conflict between two employees, trying to figure out, get to the bottom of what it is that frustrates and find a way that we can meet in the middle. We need to, more than ever, just look at the big picture and ask ourselves these hard questions. So as we bring everything together, we just need to consider the ways that we operate that can be tweaked or that maybe should be looked at. And we need to do things and activities and represent and reward and hold accountable the behaviors that we want to see more of, and then hold accountable the ones that are inappropriate. And we can't let, as managers, we can't see somebody gossiping and degrading a boomer or degrading a Gen Z person by using some inappropriate comment based on their age and let that go. As managers, we are tasked with a greater responsibility than just doing the job in our department. We are a member of the management team and we need to recognize that it's wrong and address it in that moment. Now you need to address it in a proper way and you need to have the skills from your employer to be able to do that. And these are things that we need to celebrate, respect, and uphold. So we want to encourage this because it is going to make us collectively better and it's not going away. Whether we like it or not, we are going to have a much younger workforce to deal with. So here's some ideas and tips on this slide, just, ways that we can, we've talked about this. One of the things that I really like a lot, I may not have given enough time to, is long-term influencers. So people that have been with the company a long time, they can speak to the history. They can speak to the values. That is valuable for them to be a part of. So consider making them part of your orientation. But, and they're in a unique position to nurture new employees. So bring that boomer, if you will, in to the process and give them a stake in the game with somebody being buddied up to them that they are now kind of tasked with nurturing. Just giving them that responsibility is going to help them feel more valued by you. But it's not just the older generation that has something to offer to the younger. We need to realize that the younger generation has a ton of knowledge that is automatic in their thinking. They are more readily adaptable to technology. They look at things on a quicker level when it comes to technology. They immediately can brainstorm a new way to bring technology into the environment. So let's do some reverse mentoring. Let's mix up our teams of employees in a way that, maybe the younger group does a technology training, or maybe the younger group also has a part in the orientation of the new employees. And they're the ones that teach the people about the computer system that you use, or the fun thing that you do at work, the fun part about your work. And maybe you have somebody else focus on customer service. And what you're doing is twofold. You're bringing your team into an important thing, right? Because they're feeling valued by you, that you are bringing them into your onboarding process. But you're also showing your new recruits that you value your entire team, that you value the diversity and the values and the qualities and the knowledge that the different people bring. So when you do things like that, you are also making a statement about your company to somebody that is brand new to your company. And in that first day and hour in the application process, people are making judgments about whether or not they're going to be happy in your workplace and whether or not they want to work for you. If your application process is all manual, that's going to turn some people off. If you don't have a link where they can apply on Indeed or from LinkedIn or something, then that may turn them off to you. And keep in mind, a large percentage, more than half, probably about 70 or so, are looking for jobs. So we need to be that employer that they don't want to leave. And we need to look at ways that we can streamline our processes so that we are a real choice for the younger generation. So we don't want to, lump everybody together and forget that we need to be treated as individuals. We want to realize that even though these are the general stereotypes for each age group, that we realize that those born on the cusp may have, attributes or values on either side, and the way somebody's raised, regardless of their age, may be different. So you're going to have exceptions to every rule. So don't automatically lump somebody into a category just because of their age. Realize that we all have something different of value to bring to the table. So we are right up on the time.
You know how I am, Michelle. Start on time and look at you ending on time. Thank you, Michelle, for your expertise and your time. We appreciate it so much. I do welcome questions. Feel free to send those via the chat box or the question and answer section. A few reminders: I will be sending out these slides for you to reference and share with your organization should you wish. And I will be sharing the recording. So if you want to share it with some of your leadership team that might not have been able to participate at this time today, you can share that as well. A friendly reminder, our Clear Up the Chaos Power Hour with Michelle that we co-host takes place the second Tuesday of every month. So that's going to be taking place actually this coming Tuesday, March 9th.
Oh my gosh.
I know, the month is just flying by. And the topics that we're going to be discussing are expected HR changes under the Biden administration. Nothing has been put into place yet, but these are things that we're anticipating, and we just hope that we can help you prepare for as an organization. So if you haven't registered and you are interested, please go online and register, and I'll be sure to send you the Zoom information so you can participate. And again, that takes place the second Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. So make sure and mark that on your calendars. And again, I welcome any questions. and appreciate your time very, very much. So, and if you think of something after you've logged off, feel free to always shoot me an email, and I'm happy to relay that to Michelle. A friendly reminder as well, as a valued client, you do have complimentary access to Blakeman and Associates and Michelle. So should something come up and you need assistance with, you do have access complimentary to her. If you're not registered with Michelle and Blakeman, please feel free to reach out to myself, and I'd be happy to get the paperwork to you so we can get that in place, and you'll be good to go should something arise. So again, feel free to stay on if you have any questions that you would like Michelle to answer. And again, I appreciate your time and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.
So far, I don't have any questions coming through, Michelle, but we'll sit here for a few minutes and see.
We were really right on time. That worked out well.
You did amazing. Yes, it was perfect. Start on time, end on time. Everyone can go to lunch. Indeed, indeed.
I know,
okay,
that's true.
I know. Well, people are signing off, so I'm going to sign off. And again, I appreciate it so much, Michelle.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.